Kill Knight is a twin-stick isometric shooter that drops you into the iron greaves of a knight who's got to kill his way out of hell. It's a riotous blitz of eye-burning action that has you fighting wave after wave of demonic attackers across 5 brisk, handcrafted levels. The whole thing is soaked in enough atmosphere to drown a hellbound goblin. It sports these gorgeous, grimdark visuals and a heart-pumping electronic soundtrack that, from the very first menu screen, would fit really well between like the Hacks and Cloak, Nine Inch Nails, that goth club from the beginning of The Matrix. And even though this game is kicking my ass, I have not gotten past the second level yet after like an embarrassing number of hours playing it. I can't get enough of Kill Knight's uniquely satisfying brand of action. It's deceptively straightforward, offering only a few wrinkles to its wave-based gameplay to kind of spice things up. Instead, it chooses to deliver this really focused experience, and it kind of reminds me in that way of Hotline Miami or even Geometry Wars. And it just sinks you into this necrotic, sort of blissed out trance of demonic carnage. There's a purity to Kill Knight that feels of a piece with a couple other games from an indie developer named Sorath, released over the last 10 years. Devil Daggers was their first title. It came out in 2016, and then its spiritual successor, Hyperdemon, came out a little bit later in 2022. They both have this similar kind of stark polygonal look that I think would fit right in between Unreal Tournament and Quake. And like Kill Knight, they both drop you into this just frenetic wave-based combat, except with these two, it's more of a first-person arena, and you're just surrounded by all these enemies. You've got to survive as long as you can. Though neither Devil Daggers or Hyperdemon features a soundtrack the way Kill Knight does, they both have this kind of ghostly, sickly sound design that hits really hard and might as well function as a score. And then Kill Knight kind of just feels like the direct aesthetic cousin of these games, basically, is what I'm saying. And they make me feel the same way when I play them all, right? It's this kind of white knuckle survive as long as you can, just do whatever you need to do to cut through all these enemies kind of vibe, especially because all three of them have a scoreboard at the end that you can just see immediately how well you're doing against everybody else that's made the same run. And really, I just feel like it's a good reminder that you don't need the kind of novelty that procedural generation gives you, like we have in all of these roguelikes. You don't need that in order to create a satisfying kind of run-based combat experience. But where I fell off of Sorath's games after a little more than kind of just a few hours, partially just because the combat really is so punishing, partially because there's not much of a level design to those games, I still find myself really glued tight to the gameplay in Kill Knight. And that's despite the fact that, like I said, it's just completely clobbering me, man. Like, I'm terrible at this game. I think the answer to why lies in more than just the generic shift from first-person shooter to twin-stick action. And to find that reason, we actually need to go all the way back to 2006. So in 2006, Microsoft Studios published Gears of War, a new IP from Epic Games that in many ways would be the iconic entry in the Xbox 360's lineup of first-party titles. It consolidated a number of important kind of new influences that were emerging at that time. It took the sort of third-person action perspective that you get from Resident Evil 4 and modified it with a cover-based system that had been in other games before. There was a PS2 shooter called Kill Switch, but Gears really kind of took that cover-based system and elevated it for a new era. And then it wrapped that kind of really sticky gameplay loop up in a visual package that at the time felt just mind-blowing. The formula was so sticky, in fact, that the cover-based shooter quickly kind of ossified into its very own thriving subgenre through the 2000s and the 2010s. In addition to all the Gears of War sequels, you had games like Binary Domain, Vanquish, that all built experiences around that feature, while even adventure games kind of outside of this normal genre, like Uncharted, as well as RPGs like Mass Effect 2, added that cover-based aspect on top of pre-existing shooter framework. So it was just really influential. But in my opinion, Gears of War's most important contributions to game designers' toolkits lied not with the snap-to-the-wall pop and shoot loop, but instead it's what Gears did with a different gap in the action that created a flexible new verb with endless tactical possibilities and extraordinary haptic satisfaction: the active reload. Active reload took the tiny periodic bit of downtime in every shooter where you have to reload your gun's clip, and it filled it with this timing-based minigame. Ordinarily, your weapons in Gears of War reload on their own whenever you run out of ammunition. Even back in 2006, this was pretty standard practice for how weapons behaved in third and first person shooters. But if you chose to reload manually, a small progress bar would appear on screen. The bar had 3 colors, black, gray, and white. If you hit the reload button again while a rapidly moving progress marker was in the gray area, you got yourself a quick reload, which got you back into the action that much faster. You stop it in the white area, a much smaller area, and jackpot, you got the fast reload as well as a little bit of extra damage for your current clip of rounds. But mess the timing up, which is pretty easy to do in the heat of a locust swarm, and your weapon jams, leaving you vulnerable to attack while poor Marcus gets the thing going again. I remember playing Gears of War for the first time. I was running through the co-op mode in my buddy's shitty dorm room. It was our freshman year, and I was fresh off selling my Xbox at the request of my high school girlfriend roughly 3 weeks before we'd break up. I'd convinced myself that in college I was going to move past video games, that they were just kid stuff, that they weren't becoming of a big grown-up like myself. But for my buddy Mike, I'd make an exception. And while Gears of War didn't really fully inaugurate myself back into the gaming world, that honor belongs to Mass Effect and Mass Effect 2, 2 games which would then launch a 10-year career in game studies academics. It nevertheless felt like a revelation. Sure, the graphics were incredible, and the blend of horror and action felt visceral, but it was this tiny little innovation, the active reload, that burrowed itself into my muscle memory and kept me coming back for more. If you've ever read anything about compulsion loops, you'll recognize pretty quickly what makes active reload such an effective mindworm of a mechanic. Adapting a definition presented by Adam Crow to a bunch of mass media marketing students at University of Michigan in the early 2010s, Joseph Kim defined compulsion loops as, quote, a habitual designed chain of activities that will be repeated to gain a neurochemical reward, a feeling of pleasure, or a relief from pain. For Kim, compulsion loops were more tools for creating an addiction-like relationship between the player and the game, something that a publisher could easily transform into profit. It's about creating a certain kind of stickiness, the word I've already been using, that happens frequently enough to redirect and once again secure player attention. With Gears of War's active reload system, Epic Games took what was already a pretty sticky loop, advance, find cover, shoot, advance, and supercharged it with this new little bit of kinetic friction. Active reload takes a mundane break in the action and turns it into a timed challenge that immediately rewards or punishes players with a small but noticeable change to the avatar's efficacy in the game world. Along with the reaction time aspect of the challenge, action reload also adds some cognitive crunch, as you've always got the option to simply let the reload take place as normal. Sure, it's slower than a successfully executed active reload, but it's also much less risky. If you attempt the active reload and fail, your gun gets jammed, and in the midst of an intense firefight, that could be the end of you. It all kind of just comes together in this really powerful alchemy where a little decision switch in the middle of an already compelling loop provides that extra dopamine nudge and leaves players chasing the dragon of a perfect reload in the middle of a hectic firefight. Kill Knight takes active reload and ups the ante. Like Gears of War, the Knight's weapons reload automatically when the clip empties, and, like in Gears, when your weapon reloads, it presents the player with a rapid moving progress bar and a little sweet spot. And if the player times a button press in that spot, you get your little reward. The twist in Kill Knight is that rather than a single reload button to push, us lucky rats are given 3 different buttons in this frenetic Skinner's box, each of which offers its own unique reward. One button gives your primary pistols quick power up, depending on which pistols you're using. Another sucks a whole bunch of blood gems in, fueling your screen-clearing ultimate attack, which also generates your only source of healing in the game. And then finally, another triggers a powerful melee attack that helps to reload your secondary heavy weapon too. It's an explosion of situational decision-making every 30 seconds, and it's just total catnip for my brain. It's also a key source of Kill Knight's enticing difficulty. Yes, these 3 active reload options are all about giving players even more angles from which to blast their demon foes, but it also fills that tiny gap in the gameplay loop with a tight decision tree. And in the heat of battle, sometimes encountering that tree feels like running up against a mental wall. Suddenly, a split second later, you've forgotten to trigger the active reload at all, and there you are, up Styx Creek without a paddle. The difficulty isn't just in the Demon Horde's relentless approach, but in the battle to keep your own head clear enough while they press in. To be honest, it's exhausting, which is why I'm so glad that Kill Knight's levels only last 5 to 7 minutes. I'm not sure such a busy articulation of active reload would have worked for me for a long campaign game like Gears of War, but over the course of a single Kill Knight level, the busyness becomes central to the kind of eye-burning thrill. It's this sticky loop that's really unlike anything I've played in the last several years, and because of its crunchy regularity that it pops up, once I get into the groove of a run, I begin to look forward to the next reload. as an opportunity to switch up my tactics and really bring it back to the denizens of hell. Anyways, that's kind of all I wanted to talk about today. It's just a brilliant little game, and I think this little moment in the overall design is just genius. I love the way it hits, and I wish more games would take advantage of this kind of active reload space to think about what it means tactically for players. And it takes an aesthetic and a gameplay loop that I've already been loving from other indie games like Hyperdemon and Devil Daggers. It just takes those aesthetics and really updates the underlying gameplay with this super innovative elevation of a 2000s era bit of interactive design. It's great stuff. Give it a shot. Thanks for listening. Hope you found this interesting. If you like this kind of deep dive into, smaller minutia of what I think makes games really interesting, let me know. And I hope you join me next time. Bye.